All right, L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Happy belated Tu B'Shvat. 1 day late still counts. So L'chaim, drinking the wine, one of the 7 fruits of Israel. So tonight we're going to change from the regular of speaking about the parsha and something related to the weekly portion, and instead focus on something related to Tu B'Shvat, since that was yesterday and we didn't get a chance to celebrate it. Tu B'Shvat is the new year for the trees, which is a strange concept. We're hard to wrap your head around the new year for trees, but originally it was a tax idea. Just like you have the fiscal new year with its dates, and so the taxes, which were the meiser, the certain tithes you took from the trees, the cutoff date for the year of tithes was the 15th of Shvat. And the reason is because it's coming to the end of winter, or it's supposed to be, at least in Israel, and so it's the new cycle of the trees begins. So the potential, what lays in store for the spring, is springboarded from the 15th of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat. And so that day was the new year, the new cycle of growth for the trees. And so the new year of tithes. It became, especially with the Kabbalists in Tzvat in the 15th century and 16th century, it became a very significant holiday beyond the tithes, which we don't practice anymore, and celebrating trees and the symbolism of the fruits and trees. The Arizal, the famed Kabbalist of Tzvat, his student started a Tu B'Shvat Seder, which is taking the fruits of Israel. They had 4 cups of wine and different passages they read, mimicking the Pesach Seder. And the idea was to this freedom that we celebrate at the personal level in Pesach, but also we can celebrate what the trees give to us, what fruit give to us. So tonight, we want to explore one specific idea that we can learn from the trees. There are a couple of ideas that we can gain inspiration, we can learn how to live from the trees. The foundation of this idea comes from the Torah, from a very unlikely source. When discussing the laws of battle, of war, Torah says you're not allowed to, when you're going on an offensive, you're at war, you're not allowed to chop down fruit trees. Even if you're in the middle of a war zone, you have to be careful not to destroy fruit-producing trees. And the terminology Torah uses, V'chi Adam Eitz Hasadeh, is the tree of the field a person? Meaning, it's not your enemy, it's not attacking you, you can't attack it. But the Talmud reads this and plays on the word and says, Ki Adam Eitz Hasadeh. A person is the field of a tree, is a tree of a field. And it says that the metaphor of a tree is a metaphor for each human being. And we find throughout Tanakh, multiple times, trees are used as metaphors for its human beings. And that became the basis, especially on Tu B'Shvat, of exploring not only for the environment what fruits give us and what trees give us, but also looking at trees, looking at organic growth, at agriculture as a metaphor, as a springboard for examination of our own lives. And if we can find seeds of ideas, in the pun there, of how trees grow, we can learn about ourselves as well, how we grow. You think about it, nature's been doing its thing for a long time, thousands of years, and it's been successful. Look, it's sustainable, trees are growing, and the next generation of trees are growing, the fruits are still growing on trees. It's doing something right. So we can learn from this process, this divinely orchestrated process, in guiding our own choices in life. Trees weren't given a choice how to grow. Trees, God designed them in a certain fashion. The process of the growth of trees to be sustainable. We who have choices, we can choose to live a life one way. We can make choices which can ruin our own growth, or we can choose a way of life which sustains growth. But if we look at the way God designed nature, we can learn for ourselves as well how we can live up to that design as well. So there are many elements of the growth of trees and of fruits and grains that we can take inspiration from, we can learn from.
Does that have something to do, like, I know when somebody passes away, you can buy a tree or some trees to plant in Israel. Is there a connection about the growth, in the land?
Trees are a metaphor for people, so that's a connection in itself. But it is also a sort of fundraising tool for JNF. Right? They want people to invest in Israel, and it's a way of, in memory of someone, growing trees. So it's not like from the Torah, this idea of planting a tree in memory of someone. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to donate money to somewhere, to a cause, growing a tree, it seems fitting. So we're thankful for William for coming out this evening. And before we, I share some ideas, William also has a lot of experience. With his wife Maya, he founded the Alliance Colony Reboot, a farm in New Jersey, bringing back farming to an old Jewish farming settlement, which his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were involved in and founded as well. So over the last couple of years, he's been setting up a farm there and been involved heavily with that agriculture. And so he's going to share a few things that he's learned personally from his experience that can help us also navigate our life.
Sure.
Thank you, William.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for having me here tonight. Menashe mentioned that we mentioned the name Alliance Colony Reboot, but we've changed our name since we started. We started off as Alliance Colony Reboot, which was a tribute to the original Alliance Colony. That was the first Jewish agricultural settlement in the United States, or in North America, established in 1882, of which I am a descendant. We've since changed our name for the last 2 years to the Alliance Community Reboot, because these days colony has not the most positive connotation. And we want it to be more directly about community building. So a little background. I live here in Brooklyn. I've been here for 22 years. But the first half of my life I spent in Vineland, New Jersey, which is the greater area where there's a lot of farmlands and where this particular farm is located. I never understood until recently the connection of Judaism and agriculture, not just in Vineland, but really through my personal life and learning in Judaism itself, in the Torah. So I'll give you a little background. So I mentioned that in 1882 there were a group of 43 families that emigrated from Russia to escape persecution. And families were going to New York and to other areas, and some families ended up in very rural towns, including South New Jersey. And why did they end up there? There was a philanthropist, the Baron de Hirsch, who was funding the emigration of Jews and found that agriculture was a viable career or a lifestyle for people who were leaving everything behind and coming to a new land. Not to say it was easy, but it was something that everyone philosophically and practically could pick up quickly within a year. Those 43 families, the Alliance Colony was known as the first successful, and so therefore, for all intents and purposes, the first Jewish agricultural community in North America. There were others that preceded, but they didn't last more than a few years, so they don't really count. This one lasted generations. Fast forward, and by the way, Menashe also mentioned my great-great-grandfather, Moses Bayek, was the founder of this community. He was the leader of this community of 43 families to start. He was a lawyer in the old country. And when he came here, he, as everyone else did, abandoned their trades and took to the land. Some people believe that they did that with the intention of returning to being intellectuals and going back to business. And that's pretty much what happened. Today, 100-something years later, 1882, there are a few Jewish farmland owners in that area, but none actively farming, and none really farming Jewishly. And some people ask, what does a Jewish farm mean? Is it just you're a Jew who owns a farm? The way we describe it, and my wife Malia describes it, is that anything can be Jewish if you suffuse that activity with Jewish values. So if it's informed by Torah and it's informed by your daily ritual, then anything can be Jewish. So this is a Jewish farm. This is a farm where we would like to not just adhere to sustainable practices, which itself is a Jewish value, sustainability and profitability, but also we're interested in teaching other people about agriculture and Judaism and how intertwined they are. Menashe and I, over some years, I learned a lot. For me, it was new, learning Torah, and I learned just how much of commerce and law is based on agriculture. Things were traded with seeds and plants, and examples in Talmud are about oxen and farms and things that we may not directly be able to relate to, but as my father-in-law, Arthur Kurzweil, says, when you're studying Talmud and there's an ox, today that's not an ox, that's a car, it's a bus. And the law is as relevant when these laws were created as to now. So jumping ahead, just a brief current history. My family have inherited this land over the years. There was about 70 acres, which is a good portion of Prospect Park, if you can imagine how big that is, of land that we had no personal interaction with other than to lease it to local farmers who could do common crops like soy and corn, just to maintain the farmland assessment, keep it in the family, and then one day the goal, as I understood for a few generations, was to sell it and develop it and turn it into houses and cash out pretty much. My wife and I sort of threw a wrench into the works when we discovered that there's a growing movement of Jewish farmers. You may have seen in social media and in some publications that there's Jewish organizations like Hazon and those organizations under their umbrella that are bringing back farming to Judaism, and it's with young people. This is new. It clicked when I went to a Sukkah Fest, if anyone has ever heard of Sukkah Fest, at the Isabella Friedman Jewish Retreat Center, that I was connected to this movement, and I never had understood it, but it clicked with us, and we felt that we could become a part of this movement. So over the last few years, my wife and I bought out some relatives of their shares of land, and we bought a house that was there, and with a plan, with a vision to bring back Jewish farming to that area, which since, for the last 30 years or 40 years, the Jewish population has dwindled to where there's pretty much, when we go, we're like the only Jews there, a handful of other Jews there. There's an old synagogue built in 1889 across the street from our house. Our fields are at that corner, the Jewish cemetery, where all my relatives, forefathers are interred. It's a very auspicious intersection there, and so we're right there at that hub, and we're hoping to build a farm and community together. So the theme of tonight, I saw Menashe cleverly titled "No Pain, No Grain." So I guess I'll speak to that, and it's also in the spirit of Tu B'Shvat. So no pain, no grain doesn't necessarily mean if you have pain, you will get grain. And that's one of the things, that's one of the risks that you take being a farmer, is that nothing you do is guaranteed. It depends on God, it depends on the weather, it depends on a number of variables that can affect your crops. You may have heard or be familiar with the organic movement. It's very popular, especially here in Park Slope. My wife and I decided we would like to strive to be organic. We do feel that pesticides can especially cause harm to the environment. So we're striving to do that. So back to the theme, I would say that the last 3 years have been very painful. It's been a great learning experience. Regarding Tu B'Shvat, and I'll tell you more about that, while it's on my mind regarding Tu B'Shvat, as Menashe explained, it's a seasonal holiday. It marks when trees, you can pick the fruits from the trees, hence I believe this beautiful array of fruit here. I've heard the question posed, like, why don't we just celebrate the New Year for trees on Rosh Hashanah? It's a new year. Why not have everything have a new year at this time? And as I understand it, at least logistically, the rains are all falling during Rosh Hashanah in Israel, and the ground is like super saturated with water, but the nutrients are not yet drawn up into the trees. So there's a resting period for the trees, and over that time, the trees are waiting, and they're absorbing nutrients, and then finally by Tu B'Shvat, the fruit is born. Similarly, my wife and I had this has been a waiting period for us. Like I feel we have yet to experience our Tu B'Shvat with the farm. I'm not a farmer. It's in my blood. But my only experience has been growing some what they call volunteer vegetables in the compost on my windowsill. So a volunteer vegetable, I learned, is when you compost, which is fun. You just take your organic trash and put it in a bin. There's not a lot of work that needs to be done with it, and you get very fertile soil. You get a fertile medium within which you can grow plants and nourish plants. And sometimes in the compost grows like little seeds that you didn't know were in there. They haven't dissolved. And they grow into plants of their own. They're called volunteer plants. So I got the green thumb a few summers ago. I was composting on my fire escape, and then little tomato plants started coming out. And I took each tomato plant and I put it in a soda bottle. I even had a debate with you. I said, look, we're upcycling the soda bottles because we're serving a higher purpose with the soda bottles growing a plant. And you deftly argued that who's to say that the plant is a better use of the soda than the soda itself. The soda may bring more joy or peace on earth than that tomato plant. You're right. Anyway, so that got me, that actually inspired me to seek out farming and gardening experiences, including the Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center. So right here in Brooklyn, I got my first taste of it, and it all started to click. I have these relatives, and we have, you said 10 minutes? I don't want to overdo it. So jumping ahead, it's been a struggle. My wife and I are not farmers. We are learning as we go along. If anyone here has farming experience, we would graciously accept your advice. We've heard all kinds of advice. The last 3 years have not been fruitful as in bearing fruit, but they have been fruitful as in gaining knowledge about how the land works, how the neighbors work. We need to know our neighbors, and how the government works regarding organic certification and use of land. You would think that farming, being one of the most basic skills we can have, would be simple. And even in New Jersey, where there's something called the right to farm, is very strong. People can complain about you farming, but your right to farm with the government is so recognized that you will usually trump other people's complaints. Even given all that, it has still been a struggle. And so this is our third year. 3 years is important in agriculture. You mentioned earlier that you asked about a tree being planted for someone born, and you mentioned that there's examples of trees as people that we learn about. One that I learned when our son turned 3 is that he had his Sharon. He had his first haircut, as your son did, and many others here have. And I learned that that is a parallel to a tree. The tree, I believe, should not be halachically should not be, or by common law, Judaism should not be cut for the first 3 years. It should grow and nourish itself, even if it has little fruit. Only after 3 years, our children are like these trees, that they reach a new level of understanding at age 3. So look, I'm not the best farmer. But this experience has definitely brought me closer to the land, brought me closer to Jewish community and learning. I guess I wanted to save some time. If there were logistical questions, I'll tell you very briefly. We've been working with a young farmer, Nathan Kleinman, who's like the only Jew in the area, who was very interested in our work, and he is a seed bank proponent, and he harvests and cultivates heirloom seeds that are rare but could be useful. And together we've been experimenting on the land, testing it without pesticides for the last 2.5 years to see what thrives and what just doesn't cut it. And we now have a pretty good idea of what we can do. So we're hoping that in year 3 we'll break even, and then year 4 we'll become profitable. Sustainability does not only apply to your approach to the land, it has to apply to your economic model. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So I may have used my time. So
we'll do at the end.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay. So questions for the end. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, William. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
You play right into
Very interesting.
into
Yes.
the talk.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to get dejected by the talk.
Okay.
You'll hear why in a second.
Okay.
I
So
was just wondering, you said you live in Brooklyn, do you go there every,
Yeah. So
Stay
we
there?
just had a baby 6 months ago. Less frequently these days, but we were going every other weekend
Yeah.
to spend down there. Yeah.
you want to make a trip to Vineland, you can speak to William.
We do host.
is
Yeah.
that close to Philly, Philadelphia?
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention is that since we're it was purposely set in in this rural area of South Jersey because it's on a train track. There's a train station that stops right there, 40 minutes from Philadelphia. Atlantic City, Norma train station where we are, Philadelphia, and New York City. So there was an industry of agriculture back in the 1800s.
Interesting. So, there's a fascinating story in the Talmud. You may be familiar with, but every time I learn this story, I see new depth in it. A very famous character named Choni Hamago, is called Choni the Circle Maker. Just a little background on who Choni was and how he got his name. One time there was a drought in Israel, and they really were struggling, the Jewish people, with this drought. Thank you, William. Just the whole thing around you there. Thanks. And they had nothing to do. They prayed, nothing worked. And Choni, who was a very pious sage, he drew a circle, and he prayed to God. He said, I'm not leaving this circle on the ground until it's rain. And it's a long story how first little droplets came, and he says, God, this isn't the rain I asked for. And then suddenly a flood of rain came too much. And again he said, God, I'm not leaving the circle, it's what I asked for. Finally, exactly the perfect balance of rain came. And from then on he was called Choni Hamago. Choni the circle drawer, and he gained fame as being a very pious individual, that he can, make these deals with God. In fact, the head rabbi at that time told him, if you are a Choni, I would have excommunicated you for being so audacious and having such chutzpah to God. So the Talmud says that this individual, Choni, he struggled with one verse in the Torah. And it's a verse which we say during the benching. It speaks about, it's from Psalms. It speaks about the exile, when the Jews were exiled after the first temple in Babylonia. And it says, we say in the beginning of benching as well, B'shuv Hashem, B'shuv Asiyin, when God returns the captives of Zion, Hayinu Kechomin, we were like dreamers. And it compares the time where they spent outside of Israel, the 70 years between the two temples, as dreamers, as in a dream. And he always wondered, the Talmud says, how could a person dream for 70 years? It's a long dream. That was his question. As he's thinking this question, he takes a rest in the shade and he sees a farmer, an old farmer, planting a tree. And he asks this guy, how long will it take? When will this tree bear fruits? And the farmer tells him he's planting a form of carob tree that will take 70 years until fruits start to grow. So Choni asks him, says, are you going to be around to see the fruits? And the farmer looks him in the eye and says, no. But my children and grandchildren will be here. And he explains that I was born into a world, I inherited a world with carob trees, and I'm leaving a world for my children and grandchildren with carob trees, with these fruit. And it says, at that moment, Choni was overtaken with exhaustion. He fell asleep. And the story goes in the Talmud, he slept for 70 years. He wakes up, how does he know it's 70 years? He wakes up, and he sees someone sitting by this tree enjoying the fruits. And he asks, are you the farmer who planted this tree? I says, no, I'm his grandson. And he realized what had happened to him. That 70 years later, the fruits are finally growing. Because he went to the Beit Midrash, and he asked anyone, is Choni's son still here? He says, no, he's passed on. His grandchildren are here. And he hears them studying the Beit Midrash, and they were complaining, we wish we would have a clarity of Torah like Choni had in his days. So he tells them, hey, I'm Choni. No one believed him. He's been dead for 70 years. He hasn't been seen. And they didn't believe him. They didn't want to, give him the respect he deserved. So he turns to God. He says, God, I can't handle life like this anymore. O chavrusa, either I need a friend, companion, o misusa, or death, take my life. And indeed, his life was taken. God took his life. His prayers were answered. That's the story in the Talmud. A strange story on so many levels. But recently, this time around, Tu B'Shvat, usually this season, I like looking at the story again. There's always, there's messages here. There's something more than just a story of a carob tree and a cute little thought from this farmer. And I came across an insight, an explanation that I think is really beautiful, that talks to this idea that William was talking about, and something we can learn from as well. Very pertinent in our lives. What was bothering Choni about this verse? Of course, a dream's a metaphor for a time you're not fully awake. And so during exile, when the Jews weren't in their homeland, we didn't have a divine consciousness, it's compared to a dream. So what bothered him that a person could dream for 70 years? So there's a commentator on the Talmud, the Maharsha, found in the back of almost every edition of Talmud. And he explained, he says, Choni was bothered. For 70 years, dreaming means you weren't living a life of purpose. A dream is when you're living for something else. There's a state of consciousness, and now I'm dreaming of consciousness, but you're not really awake. And the same is true for exile. It's a purposeless existence. It's always trying to be somewhere else. We're trying to get rid of this state of being, trying to get out of this situation to get somewhere else. And Choni was bothered 70 years, an entire lifetime. How could an entire lifetime of a person, how could the lifetime of 70 years be lived for nothing? Be lived as a dream, as not productive, as not reality? He was so disturbed by the possibility of that I'm living now only for a future time, that I'm living now in a time I don't want to be here. So how can a person be subjected to a useless existence? That's what bothered him. This little episode with the farmer taught him that a number of things. On the most basic level, it taught him that even though these next 70 years of the carob tree growth are going to be fruitless, they're not bearing any fruit. This farmer in his lifetime and his son's lifetime will never gain anything from this tree. But 70 years' time, the fruit that his grandchildren will have is only thanks to the effort he put in today. And that told Choni about years of exile. That people were living maybe unfulfilled lives in conditions that didn't suit them. Maybe they felt their actions weren't real, weren't meaningful. But the only way there could be a redemption, the only way there could be a better life later on is if we go through those motions in the difficult times. And so we face dark times in our lives. We face times where we feel useless, worthless. What am I achieving? On a personal level, we feel that way. On a communal and societal level, we feel that way. You know, if I weren't here, would the world change? Would my community change? What am I doing here? What am I doing with my life? We all go through those moments, and it's tempting in those moments to give it up. But if we realize that only through living through those moments we have our highs, we have our moments of fruit, where we are productive, where we do contribute, but we have to go through those processes. So he learned that lesson from this farmer, from those 70 years. But there's something deeper here as well. And the more I thought about it, the end of the story sounds perplexing as well. And I think the end of the story really translates the whole story. They came to Beit Midrash, and no one knew who he was, yet they're quoting him. They're saying, if only we lived in that time where there was clarity. What's going on in that story, and how does it project back to this theme and idea? I think there's something very powerful there. "70 years is a generation, or more than a generation, it's a lifespan. It could be a couple of generations. But there's an idea in some Kabbalistic texts that 70 years, every 70 years, the world goes through some sort of metamorphosis, some sort of real change that happens in 70-year increments in the world, because it's a lifespan. So every 70 years is sort of a new life, a new energy in the world. Choni fell asleep for 70 years, right? And he wakes up after 70 years, and you think, in the carob tree metaphor going on, he's reached the stage of enlightenment. The fruit are now growing on the tree, right? So those 70 years of dreaming, which he literally went through, are now over, and is awake. The world is colorful. The fruits are growing on this tree. So if he's living through this metaphor, he's now in the most enlightened time, right? Yet he goes to the Beit Midrash, and you think he's enlightened, he's now reached a higher state of consciousness than he had before. And he goes there and he has no idea what they're talking about. They don't know who he is, he can't contribute to the conversation, he feels lonely, hopeless, lost. And the idea is that even though where he was before may have been a lower state of consciousness, in the metaphor, he may have been living through the early stages of growth of this tree. That was him. That's where he belonged. And if you fast forward, fast tracked, sleeping through the process, and fast tracked to the end of the story, to the good times, he was lost. He didn't belong there. He couldn't find his footing. And what that tells us, and it means to us in our lives, is that the only way we can have the end result is if we go through the process. If we have the whole entire ups and downs of the way there. Not only practically do you need to plant the seed in order to have the fruit, But the 70 years, and this I think William was talking about, is in itself a learning process, is in itself part of you changing, you developing. The challenges make you who you are, and at the end of the day, when you have that product, that redemption, that fruit, you're there. You are able to experience it. You're able to be a part of it. You belong there. And if you just jump to the end, if you would say, pray to God, we shouldn't have any more challenges. Pray to God that I shouldn't have just whatever the end result of my life, wherever I'm going to be successful, let me get that today. If you would have that, you would feel like a fraud in that success. You'd feel like an imposter in that life you're living. It wouldn't be you. You didn't go through a process. You never developed yourself to be worthy of that product. And so that's the feeling Chanu was feeling. He says, I don't belong here. That's why he said, God, either a friend means either I need to belong. I need a sense of community.
Yeah, community.
I need to feel that I deserve this. I am supposed to be a part of this. Because I didn't develop with the rest of the world. And I'm stuck 70 years ago. Right? So, in the metaphor, if the farmer would have been able to somehow press fast forward on the seed and maybe genetically manipulate the seed to grow fruit tomorrow, he wouldn't have appreciated this fruit. He wouldn't have been able to really have the fruit in their fullest sense because he didn't go through the 70 years. Practically, maybe he had the fruit. The metaphor doesn't work very well. But in life, and this is more than just, we have to go through these moments in order to have the result. We live in the present. And in the here and now is where my existence belongs. We all dream I could be somewhere else, someone else. If only I had different life circumstances. If only, this would change. You can keep dreaming from today to tomorrow about maybe being somewhere, something else. But that wouldn't be you. Who you are is right now, in this situation, your life, in the present. And if you're not able to be present there, even if you got somewhere else, it wouldn't be you. You would never feel comfortable. You would never feel successful, fulfilled, because it's not who you are. The only person who you are, the only life you can live is your present life in the present moment. And if you live your present life in the present moment, then eventually you will develop, you will grow, you will reach that stage of enlightenment, of growth, of bearing fruits. But it's only because in the here and now you're here. To try to be somewhere else is never going to work. That explains the whole story. What bothered Choni is in exile. If we're always trying to get to redemption, always trying to leave that state of being, always working on trying to leave where we are now, he says that's not a life to live. And what he was taught is you're right. Because even in the exile, even in dark moments, we're not only meant to try to escape, appreciate what I have right now. I am here right now in this moment. Right now, the only person that matters is who I am. And the only person I can strive to be is the best that I could be in the life I've been given, in the moment of right now. And to escape that, and to try be something else that you're not. To try be someone else that you're not. Or to try live in a era that you don't. You'll never actually get there. The only way you can get there is if in the now you live where you are. And if you look at a tree, the way a tree grows is three parts of the tree. The tree has its roots, dug deep in the ground. There's the body of the tree, which is the trunk and the branches, and the fruit. The result, the fruit that grow off the tree. Right? And these are three integral elements of the tree, and we have these three integral elements as well. We have our roots, which is, what the context of our life, the faith that we have, things that are really grounding us, that are defining which direction we're going to go, that are setting up the stage on which our life is played. Then we have the life we live, the body we have for ourselves, the choices we make, the things we produce, the direction we grow in. That's life. Then there are the results, what we achieve, the impact we have on others, the fruits we give that others can taste, the seeds which grow in those fruits that can plant more trees. So the produce, the things that we produce in the world, right? And these three are all intertwined. You can't have the fruits unless they're growing on branches from the trunk that are drawing sustenance from the roots in the soil. And to want to jump to the fruit stage before you have strong roots, the tree will just topple over. There's no grounding, no foundation for it. And to ignore, not have roots in a trunk, you can't grow food, right? So the only way you can have that end result, where you want to get to, the only way to have that fruit, is if first you invest in the roots. First you invest in who you are as a person. Invest in realizing who I am, what am I here for in this world, what's my identity, where am I supposed to be headed. Figure out the foundation of life. And then you have to have a trunk. You have to actually go through those motions. It doesn't happen overnight, but once I figure out, imagine an entrepreneur that figure out I have a niche in the market, I have an idea that's going to make millions. It doesn't make millions the next day. There's a whole process to go through, actually following through on all your ideals and ideas. That's the trunk of the tree. It takes hard work. Build, create, and sustain a life that's living in sync with the values, with the roots you've laid down. But when you go through that process, the fruits are lush fruits. Fruits are actually an extension of who you are. They have seeds in them which can perpetuate yourself. They're a real reflection of you, as opposed to just something sweet you can throw in people's directions, which isn't you invested in there. You can produce beautiful things. You can impress people. But if it's not something you've worked hard for, you've grown, you've developed, you'll never feel good about it. Because there's no you invested in that product. Or if you steal ideas from someone else and you just go sell them to the world, and people are, taking them and loving them, you never feel fulfilled because you stole. People look at you, maybe will give you respect. But you're an imposter. It's not you. And so those three stages of a tree, and they also, we go through one stage and the next and the next. First the roots then the body, and then the fruits. And that's one of the lessons, the lesson that Choni learned in that episode. That it all starts from recognizing I exist in the here and now. That's my life. That's me. And to try to be anything else, or live for something else, you frustrate yourself to death. And as successful as you may seem, or you may think you're going to be, you're going to feel hollow. You're going to feel insecure. You're going to feel empty. The 70-year process of hard work, of living in unideal conditions in exile, of living in darkness, of struggling. Live in the moments of struggle. Even if you're going through a really difficult time, that's where you are right now. That's who you are right now. Embrace it. This is me. So of course you're trying to get out of it. Of course you're looking for ways to grow, to escape it. But not to escape it, to ignore it. Not to just put on this persona that's not you. But to walk through it. To go through this process. And when you've gone through that process, the end result you reach, the enlightened state, the fruits you grow, the products you have, the self you've produced is authentic. It's you. You've become that thing.
So why did he in 70 years that he was dreaming, is that going through the process?
No.
No.
So that's, at least in my reading of this story, is that when he woke up and no one knew who he was and he didn't understand what they're talking about and he didn't value his opinion, that meant that he had technically gone through 70 years and reached that time where the world had progressed. But he, because he was dreaming, because he actually wasn't part of the progress of the world, so he didn't belong there. And what he learned from that is that dreaming doesn't mean you're asleep. If you sleep through it, then you're right, you're an imposter. Even when you're in a state of dreaming, in an unideal state, you have to live with that. So what he was learning through that process of the carob tree and then of his own life is that when Jews were in the 70 years of exile, they weren't just shut off, but they lived in the moment. And so when the verse describes them as being like dreaming, doesn't mean that they were just dreaming of a future. Dreaming is a state of being as well. And they were living in that state of being, in that moment. And that's who they were. And so with their lives, he questioned the lives were meaningless. The lives were worthless. They were just in this worthless endeavor, waiting for the return to Israel. And what he was told was no. They lived in their moment. This is their life they were given. Their cause they were given to live in Babylonia. And they made the most of it. They lived fulfilled lives at that time with what they were given. And that's what created, later on, 70 years later, that they deserved, they belonged, they felt a part of the rebuilding of Israel and the Jerusalem.
It's interesting because Homey, when he asked the farmer, he says, "What are you doing that for?" And the farmer's engaging in something of ultimate service, that you take part in an action that Hashem will provide from that for others, maybe and more than your family, because he doesn't know if it be his grandchildren, it could just be anybody. And Mahoney doesn't understand it, and he has an opportunity, so he sleeps. And the irony is that it's sort of a metaphor. The farmer and the farmer's son, their bodies are gone, but in a way they live on because what the fruits of their effort are sustaining people who are alive. So they already understand that world metaphorically. Mahoney is there physically, but he has a chance to say, oh, you can engage in something. He could have learned. It was enlightenment. It really had nothing to do with knowing scripture, but he could have said, aha, you can engage in something. You might not know the fruits. It's total equanimity. You're free from the product, just your effort. Do your effort, heart, mind, and soul, to serve Hashem, and then that'll take care of itself. So he had a chance to be enlightened in that way, and the only way he could have been present in that world with his body was to finally, aha, now I understand. And that would have been everything.
That's what it was. He didn't understand. He couldn't appreciate if something's done for something else. He felt there's no value in the means. If it's a means to an end, the means is worthless. And what the farmer was telling you is that no. Yes, I'm a means to an end for 7 years' time, but that gives value to the means. In the right now, that means is my mission. That's what I'm doing, and that in the here and now is valuable. And that's the lesson he learned the hard way through dreaming. That he wasn't present, like you said. His body was still there, but he hadn't contributed in the 70 years to come. He wasn't able to offer any insight. He wasn't able to contribute to conversation there. Yeah. So just to sum up, and I think this ties in well with what William was saying, is we all go through life and we have visions of where we want to be, what we want to achieve. We have visions of the fruit. And often when we're starting out, we just only see fruit. And we get despondent the first time we realize that I'm dealing with roots. I'm stuck in the earth, head down in the ground. And we sort of hit a brick wall. And say, I'm honestly doing nothing in my life. I'm not achieving any of those things I wanted to achieve. I'm just going into debt. I'm just, whatever the case happens to be. I'm getting nowhere with this mission, with this plan, with this goal, with this vision, with this life I've dreamed for myself, with this person I've dreamed for myself. And that's what Choni was used to understand life being. That if you're not dealing with fruit, you're dealing with nothing. How can you live a whole life of dreaming, a whole life of exile, 70 years? What sort of life is that? What he was led to understand through the metaphor of the carob tree and through his own life experience is that the roots is a valuable part, if not the most valuable part, of the future fruits. And the roots themselves is what is a worthy focus in the now. And eventually, if we focus on those roots, a trunk will grow, branches will grow. And if you have healthy roots, healthy branches, the fruit will come as well. And so it could take 70 years. It could be you'll never see it in your lifetime, the product, the fruit that you've born. Which means you can live a whole life and feel like, what do I achieve here? But you have no idea the impact you had on people. You have no idea what you've left to the world. You have to do what you have to do. You have to do right now, this is what I can achieve in life. What's going to happen with that? Where it's going to go? You can't think that way. Because it's not in your hands. I have to do what I have to do. And if it's going to be roots, it's going to be roots. If it's going to, I'm going to hopefully through that get to the trunk, great. But I have that vision that eventually that hard work will definitely pay off with the fruits. And so even if we go through challenging moments, we go through blocks, we don't feel fulfilled in what I'm doing now, we don't see it getting anywhere, we have to understand that it's part of the process. And the only way we'll feel fulfilled if we embrace that process. This is where I am. This is where I belong. And even if we will be able to fast forward ourselves to the fruits, we will feel lonely. We will feel an imposter. We will feel lost in it. And so it's a blessing that we're able to go through the process, right? It's a blessing that I have that because it's making me into a better person. It's helping me go through that process. If a kid gets accepted to Harvard College tomorrow, a 5-year-old kid, they're going to flunk. There's no way they can succeed there. So even if they've managed to fast forward the whole process of elementary school, high school, and they're into Harvard, it's worthless for them. They cannot succeed at Harvard. It's not possible for them to get anything done there. So there's no point in fast-tracking that experience to the good times, to the worthful moments, to the moments that are producing something. The only way you can have those moments and those moments be meaningful for you, be rich, be fruit-growing, is if you go through the learning stages along the way. If you grow those roots, and the roots take faith, nurture from the soil, take real, gain inspiration from something deeper than ourselves. The tree takes commitment, takes effort, takes hard work, but if you plant a seed, the roots are growing and there's a trunk, there's going to be fruit. And the results will be met. So that's one lesson, one thing we can learn from Tu B'Shvat, the birthday trees. There are many others. Come back next year. More? No, everyone can have their own meaningful messages. But this is something I think the story, you realize that one story in the Talmud can pack in so much depth to life. Anyone anything they want to share, add, argue?
A couple years ago, I was in a Trader Joe's, and I noticed they had purple carrots there.
Yeah.
And so I was curious about the purple carrots. I actually looked it up. Are these things real? How did they make them purple? And I discovered that carrots are in fact naturally purple, and orange carrots don't exist. They're a human creation. They were created. They were gradually. They're the product of hundreds of years of genetic mutation to get the carrots as sweet as possible. The purple carrots that Trader Joe's has, I don't think they produce them anymore. No one bought them. The fact is that the original purple carrots, they managed to track down wild carrots that have never been altered by humans, are terrible. They are not sweet at all. They're bitter, and people didn't like them. People didn't buy them. So the whole project petered out. And so I guess the point is that every carrot that you buy now is not, in fact, natural. It's a product of hundreds of years of human design, of human ingenuity. Many things. If you look at a pomegranate, if you look at European art from the 16th century, see the pomegranates in people's hands are tiny. They're way, way, way smaller than the pomegranates we imagine. Same thing. People people over hundreds of years figured out that if you breed one big pomegranate with another big pomegranate, you'll get a bigger pomegranate. So in fact, the size of the pomegranates we have now they're twice as large, more than twice as large as they were then. So in fact, almost every fruit and every vegetable that we eat is not natural in a sense. It's a product of human ingenuity, and if you actually think about it, it's those small things we don't think about. If you actually think about it, it's a miracle that here we have these fruits that are just they're the work of our minds, basically.
We are enjoying other people's fruits,
Yes.
which they planted hundreds of years ago. Thank you. So, we should take this to heart. We should grow like trees and enjoy the fruits.
Thank you.
Enjoy them.
Thank you.
If there are any questions for William, is